Hi everyone. I'm going to start again here. It seems that my mic was muted there, so what a mess. Um, for the last 2 weeks, we've been blocked by Facebook from streaming. We've not been able to find out why, but, I felt that finally we're going to manage to get things moving again. Welcome to another StarNet Events webcast from the Follow Your Star Foundation. But today I'm not in the museum as I usually am. I'm streaming from my home by the beach. The beach is that way. In St. Martin, and Yoda, you can see him back there. He's waiting for me to get on with it so we can go for a swim when the show's over. And I'm Nick Maley, creature effects designer for over 60 movies and also an artist. And today we have a spotlight on professional cosplay personality and Marvel Speciality costumer Riki, Riddle, LeCotey. So Riki was featured as one of the main cosplayers on Heroes of Cosplay, and despite having over 4 million followers on her Facebook page, she's a really nice lady, down-to-earth person who shares her journey through the cosplay community over the past 20 years and gives tips on getting started, on selecting characters, and on building a social media following. These Follow Your Star presentations are things that we do every Sunday, and we're hoping to inspire creative minds of all ages. So, if you're a young person looking at how to get started, or if you're an old person who wants to get out of the chair and do something creative, these are for you. So periodically through the show, I'm going to be showing our Patreon link. You'll see that. Let me just pull that banner up for you. And there it is. This is our Patreon link where people donate small amounts each month to help us do these broadcasts. We're a non-profit trying to encourage you to follow your dreams. So enough of that. Let's get on with this. Hey, there she is. Look at that.
Hello, I'm so sorry.
So tell us how you got started in doing cosplay in the first place. What happened there?
So about, I guess, over 20 years now. I grew up in a very small town in Canada. It was like, to give you an idea, so the first town I ever lived in, we had our food barged up every month. There were no roads out in the summer. There was no high school. And then as I got a little older, we got to slightly bigger towns. But like I didn't have, when I started cosplaying, we didn't have high-speed internet. We didn't have stoplights. and it wasn't like I was like a part of a larger district. The nearest largest town was 3 hours away, and that was only 25,000 people. So my little town was 5,000 people, and that was like everybody in that sort of 3-hour area. Oh, there were no conventions. Like,
what got you with that? What made you say, I'm going to leave my little town? Because, you know, one of the biggest times on doing a build is procrastination time. You know, there's all these people, they're sitting, they're you 20 years ago, they're sitting in a little town somewhere, you know, just getting up and going to a convention is a major decision for them. You know, how did you get started with that?
Yeah, so basically what it was I was really into comics and video games, and it was a couple different things. I just started getting into anime, and Halloween was coming by, and I was like, oh, there's this one girl from this anime. It's called Devil Hunter Yoko. It's very older anime, and I was like, wow, she's fun and she's outgoing and she's sexy, and I am like going through the changes of life and confused and none of those things, and I was like, it would be a lot of fun to dress up as this character. So I had a friend's mom help me make the costume. I mean, back in that time, everything was either, for us, what I had access to was satin or broadcloth. So it was this broadcloth costume. I made it. And then I went out, no one had any idea who I was, and I had a great time. And even within that, I was like, wow, I want to get my friends into anime. So I started my first anime club at school. And then it wasn't till a few years later, I was visiting somebody in California, and they're like, hey, there's an anime convention. And I was like, cool, I do this thing where I like to dress up like the characters, pretty much invented it. And so let's all dress up together. And they were like, that's really cool. We've never heard of that before. And so we dressed up all from this one anime that we liked. We went down, and it was at Anime Expo 99. And it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen. I had never really seen other anime fans. I had never seen a dealer's room. I was just like so overwhelmed. I was so excited. I would wake up so early. I'd be in costume for like 16 hours. But to be fair, even during that time, we were considered still kind of the rejects of the con. And I use rejects as a loving term, but people just didn't understand it. They were like, is this a sexual thing? And you're like, no, it's like, and back at the time, it was hard for me to explain. And obviously through years of cosplay, I've now come with a concise example. It's like wearing, and I guess even back then, there weren't a lot of nerdy t-shirts, but it's like wearing a nerdy t-shirt to like a craziest degree. And you know, if you see somebody in cosplay or you see somebody in a nerdy shirt, they probably love that series and would love to talk about it. And considering that, you know, sometimes we're really shy and we have troubles opening up, you know, it's a great way to kind of like talk about what we're passionate about. But yeah, so from there.
Do you think that part of cosplay is being able to show off your own fears and insecurities of who you are and live that character that you know? Because someone else suggested to me that, you know, that often people who were cosplayers, you know, some of them might be very shy when they're not in their costume. I think maybe that is true more of the people that are starting out than it is of the people who've become celebrities at it.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, even me, it's weird to be doing panels like this, not in costume. I definitely feel a little more confident being in costume, but it kind of like rubs off after you keep doing it, and you feel proud of what you created or what you put together, and you kind of start feeling like a little bit confidence when you're out of costume. But I think cosplay now is different for a lot of people. It's confidence. It's pride of creating something. Some people just love cosplay purely for the craftsmanship point of view. And then for some people, it is a career. It is how they make their money. And it's crazy to say that 10 years ago, you wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say, oh, cosplay is my main source of income. But for some people it is. So.
Maybe we should take a look at some of your images and you can talk to me about that making something. Talk to me about these wings here. I got several images from this particular costume. I don't know the character. I don't know where.
A long time ago. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's intriguing. So tell me about it.
So really quick, a long time ago, an artist did like a Moulin Rouge of a bunch of Disney princesses. And I was like, man, I'd love to do Tinkerbell. And I reached out to the artist. I was like, hey, are you ever thinking about doing Tinkerbell? I would love to do that version. And he's like, F no, I hate Tinkerbell. And I was like, wow, okay. So I just did my own interpretation. So it's supposed to be sort of like a Moulin Rouge burlesque version. So I the corset is custom done. It's 3 layers of fabric, fully steel bone. There's tons of jewels that I glued on it. The underwear is also custom made. The wings are metal that have been cut. And then a really cool trick I'd learned years earlier from a friend is, you know, you can take that paper that you gift wrap, right? You know, that like iridescent paper. And then what you do is you take like you sandwich the piece, and you can use stuff as simple as clothes hangers. And what you do is use like a hot knife or a hair dryer, and what it'll do is it'll seal up on either side of the of whatever the frame you want your wings to be.
Well, it was very effective, and it's a cute character too. I like it a lot. This one's you know, another winged personality, but you know, here the photograph is part of what carries this off, really. I mean, these are your photos are have gotten beyond being something that someone shoots at a convention. You know, that's one of the things that brought me around to bringing photographers into this event, was really looking at the contribution to taking what someone has built and, you know, taking it to a much higher level.
Yeah, it's sort of like a band, you know. You've got the lead singer, and then the photographer comes in and adds their notes, and then you have a whole idea. A lot of these photos, again, are way back in the day. You know, I would come up with a concept, and then I would talk with the photographer, and then we do this whole thing. So the trick about this one, and again, this is something I learned from comic book artists when they would shoot their reference for flying, is this one is shot upside down. So I'm actually lying on my back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get the hair up. But this is, and then the photographer took an action figure of the Hulk and stuck him in the back. But this is the Wasp. I think this is sort of one of the first costumes that sort of, again, set me apart. The breastplates are fiberglass that have been chromed, sculpted on a body cast. And then I wanted a low profile. So, I mean, it sounds like really common techniques now, but I didn't want to Velcro them. I didn't want to glue them because I wanted to be able to wash the bodysuit. So what I did is I had discovered, again, this is 2007, rare earth magnets. So embedded rare earth magnets into the breastplate, and then they're underneath the bodysuit. There's a removable fabric plate with the corresponding rare earth magnets. And for those of you who don't know, rare earth magnets are like super strong magnets, not like your average fridge magnet. So it locks everything on. And this costume is also very special because Stan Lee signed the breastplate, as well as the comic book artist who came up with this design, Olivia Coppell. So, and even another thing I think about is, so I don't have wings at the con, because when she's full size, she doesn't have wings. But in the bodysuit, there are 2 slits on my back. So it gives you the idea, if I were to shrink down, that's where my wings would come out of.
Cool.
But you can't ever see that kind of detail.
So, you know, some of your pieces are strictly characters, but, you know, some of them are also about you as a personality, I feel, when I'm looking at something like this. Because once you move from, you know, just trying to represent a character, once you start to get a following, it's really more like Angelina Jolie playing a character, and people follow her because she's Angelina Jolie rather than just because they like Tomb Raider, for example, for argument's sake. And so you start to see that the photographs become really more of a compromise, a piece that is, you know, about you as well as, you know, about the character. And whereas others, a piece like this seems to go completely the other way and be really very specifically about you know, about that character and about getting a sense of period, because this really does look like a pin-up card from you know, from that time.
Yeah, and sometimes it's about like I had to teach myself makeup, and I'm a one-trick pony. I've got a look, I can kind of do variations of it, but for this particular photo, a friend of mine ran a pinup studio, and so I had my one friend do period makeup, which is why my makeup looks a lot different and more period appropriate. And then Pixel pinups could do that sort of pinup-y look. So sometimes it's about finding the right context or environment for your character. I mean, it's super easy to shoot at conventions and convenient, But again, when you put all this work into a costume, you want to showcase it in the best way possible. When you look at your photo of you in costume, you want to feel proud, and it's sort of, I was equated to, I guess, like a prom photo. You got your hair done, you got your dress on, and you feel really good. So yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I've taken thousands and thousands and thousands of terrible photos just to know what to look for in the back of the camera when I'm working with a photographer, or things to warn the photographer about. Hey, like, watch out, I get a double chin. You know, a lot of new photographers are like, oh, I want to shoot you from up to give you like really heroic position, but look down at me, and you've got like a zillion chins, and that's just not flattering. And you don't want the photographer's work going out like that. You don't want your work going out like that. So when
the photographer has to be pro enough to be able to say, oh, yeah, well, that doesn't quite work. I mean, I've over time taken a lot of glamour photography photographs too, and often you'll work with someone and you say, oh, you just twist the body a little bit this way and just turn your head that way. Then you look at it and go, oh, now I've got wrinkles where there's too much flesh around the middle, and I've got these funny bits in the side. Well, no, maybe let's do, and the model is going, what's going on here? What's wrong with this? But the photographer should be able to see that, and should be able to.
And it's a trust thing too, because I've worked with photographers and they're like, okay, do this, and I'm like, I've done this enough. This is not going to look good. And there are times where I'm like, the photographer's like, do this. I'm like, this feels dumb. And then I look at the photo and I'm like, damn. I'm like, you knew what you were doing. We always have this joke that if it doesn't hurt, like if the pose doesn't hurt, it's not going to look as good. Because it's all about like control. This is totally turned into a different panel, but it's all about like, twisting and bending.
People may look at you and have an opinion of who they think you are because you've got a massive number of followers who don't necessarily, get to know you that well. But, I think that what we're discussing here is something that can appeal to lots of different people on different levels, because we are.
And the thing the reason I'm talking about all this modeling stuff is I am not a model. I'm not a natural model. I am not naturally skilled at sewing. I am not naturally skilled. I have to work at all those skills all the time. And it is really kind of, I know for up and coming people or any cosplayer, it can be demoralizing sometimes to look at someone's portfolio and just see this like complete menu of finished items. But it's like you don't realize that people go through the same struggles. And I just want people to know that, yes, like I have lots of costumes and I've been to a lot of conventions, but, I struggle with tons of things. I struggle with photo shoots. I struggle with not feeling good in my costumes. It's all part of cosplay, but, it's cosplay is so rewarding. And ultimately, I wouldn't keep doing it if it wasn't. So.
The attention that was brought to cosplay through reality TV, do you think that made it more mainstream and made it more easy to be a pro?
Yeah, and I mean, there's even different levels of pros. There's people who are models who kind of lean heavy on modeling geek characters, and then there's people who make tutorials and books and sell those, and so there's different ways to kind of lean on it. But I mean, reality shows did definitely help. I mean, after I was on my reality show, well, conventions seemed very commonplace to me, and I'm like, how do you know there's not a convention? There are so many people who came up to me afterwards and was like, I did not know conventions existed, and I did not know cosplay existed till I watched this show. And right. and I remember being so touched when a family came up to me and they said, because of the show, and for those of you who don't know, it's called Here's a Cosplay. We now cosplay as a family, and that is our family hobby. And they showed me their costumes, and they were just so proud and so happy to be there and doing something as a family.
Yeah, and the difference that you're talking about there between the people who go, I mean, obviously people go to a convention because they want to show off what they made and they want to live out that particular character. But there is definitely a line between those people who focus on being makers and those people who focus on being performers. I sometimes wonder, if the ones that are more in the dress up group are just buying what they can wherever they can and adding a few bits and pieces. Probably like being an artist, you'll start by copying some stuff that other people are making, and then get into painting your own compositions or making your own costumes. But there's a group that are focused so dramatically that their lives revolve around what they're making when they're not at not in front of a crowd.
Things up. I love this costume.
These two together, really, to these next two photos, really to accentuate the difference between having a really detailed, really nice costume in standing on a piece of paper in a situation, or taking that out and putting it in a setting that really brings it to life. And you could say, oh, there's a lot of other stuff to distract from the costume, but actually it all complements it and makes it all look that much more authentic.
Yeah, I love location shots. It's just I'm ultimately lazy, and there's not always a ton of locations. This was shot, I got up extra early. I was in Vancouver. We went up Grouse Mountain, so I'm out in public. And sometimes, like, when you're in the bubble of conventions, you're fine, you're in costume. But sometimes, even when I'm like when I'm out of that bubble, I can get uncomfortable. Like, here I am walking up to a ski lodge, going up a ski lift in costume, and I have two friends, but I'm like kind of embarrassed. And then also walking, like, you can't see it, but the heels on these shoes are they're like 4 inches razor thin, and I am trying to step up onto snow. It was like watching a deer like straight line. If you're
going to do anything like that, you have to make sure that you wear the costume and the costume isn't wearing you, right?
100%.
Whatever you do it with confidence, and people will figure that it's something extraordinary. If you do it and apologize for it, they'll say, what the hell are you doing? You have your following as a glamorous cosplayer, and you also are very, very skilled at making your own stuff. And so which came first?
Definitely the making. And even then, I don't consider myself a maker. I'm like a jack of all trades. I have a good understanding, but I always feel like all the makers that I really respect, and I find those good makers, they're always striving to be better. They're not like, I've nailed sculpting. Like, I don't need to learn anymore. So for me,
I can tell you from, it's one of the things in my book, I say you only get to be really good at something by being self-critical enough, not putting yourself down, but self-critical enough to be able to perceive what you did that was wrong. Everybody says, oh, but that's brilliant. And you say, yeah, but I could have painted that a little bit better. And I could have, when you think that what you did is brilliant, you couldn't improve on it, you're in trouble, because you can't stay ahead unless you keep moving forward. You've got to be able to see what you could have done that was better. And
I still haven't quite mastered. I'm still very self-deprecating. Like, I'm still like, oh, that's so crappy. I could have been better. That person's better. My biggest thing is I could have been faster. Why did this take me so long? But yeah, I mean, one of my really good friends is a comic book artist, Adam Hughes. One thing I did learn from him, though, is if someone comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, I love this, in his case, comic art, but in my case, like, I love this costume that you did. I really try. My first instinct is to be like, well, this sucks about it, this sucks about it, this sucks about it. But that person, like, is sincerely enjoying that costume, and I don't want to take that joy away from them by picking it apart. So I'm usually like, thank you so much.
That's the way to be, because you need to be able to get better. You need to be able to perceive what you did that really wasn't that great.
You need to be able to be self-aware and self-critical.
At the same time, you need to, take pride in what you did achieve. And when that person comes up and is inspired by what you made, that's your success. When I was making movies, I would, I'd sit down, I'd talk to a director. I got to try and realize what is in their heads, as well, inspired by what their words form in my head. And so, one of the things that was standard, they would talk to me and I'd think, oh yeah, it would be great if we could do this, and then maybe we could do that, but really what I'd like to do is this. And so I would say to them, okay, well, I think, if we do X, Y, and Z, and we've got this money in the budget, we could achieve this. and they settle on that. And
Yeah.
then go out and I try to achieve this.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I never achieve that, maybe I achieved that, but because they were expecting this, they're thrilled. And what they see, they don't know what's in your mind that you wanted to do that didn't quite work out. So take the applause, take the pleasure, and you know, and enjoy it, and have fun with it. Because ultimately, if you're having fun with what you're doing, that's a great way to spend your life.
I mean, but it is tough in the cosplay world, because it's one thing, you know, we make something, we hand it off, it's used for a shot, it's then taken by the department, put as an asset. But, you know, having to put a costume that I've spent hundreds of hours working on, putting it on, and then like, oh, why didn't I do this? Or why didn't I adjust this? Or I need to fix this. And so, like, at conventions, I sell prints. So if people want to buy a print. And sometimes it's really tough, like, you know, everybody's looking through the books. I'm constantly seeing photos. So, going back to your original question, you asked, did the craft person come first or did the model come first? And then when I would say craftsperson, because I hated my photo being taken, I'm still not a huge fan of it. In cosplay, I kind of don't mind. But so here I was working so hard on these outfits, and then I'd finish a con and I'd have no photos of this work I put into these outfits or anything. And back when I started too, it was still like funny how to cosplay photography. It's like the way cosplay photography has changed. I mean, to date myself, people were still taking photos and developing them. So, and then you'd have to scan them, and then you'd have to put them online. So you almost never saw photos of yourself unless you took them yourself. And I was having so much fun, I couldn't be bothered, and I couldn't afford a camera. So, and then, you know, low res, and the people are like, I'm going to take a picture in front of a window. And when we started, we didn't know, I say we, I'm going to say a lot of girls didn't think to wear makeup. Why do we need to wear makeup? And then it was not enough makeup because you didn't realize all these photos blow you out. And so it is nice to see that, like, people starting out now in cosplay do really have a leg up from all the knowledge cosplayers and builders and makers in movies and as hobbyists have developed. But also there is a very high standard now people are expecting when you come out of the gate and you wear a costume. So it is a little like a catch-22.
But I think you've got to think of it also a bit like going to school. You go because you want to learn something, and you're never going to produce something as a first-year student that you're going to produce as a fifth-year student. So you're going through that growing thing. This character, once again has that sense of glamour that kind of goes with that representation, glamour and personality. I see a lot of photos that this particular costume is in. Is this something that's more special? Is this one that you like particularly, or just one that
well, I love Assassin's Creed, but so a lot of the times when I do conventions, it's a balancing act. You want to bring something that looks cool and is impressive, and when people meet you, they understand why you're a guest at the convention, but you also need something that you can be in for 12 hours and hopefully go to the bathroom on your own. So this costume is, and not only that, but at the time, I was doing a lot of conventions with my friend Monica, and she had her Assassin's Creed costume. So we would wear them together as if we were a pair. So that was also like a lot of fun. If I don't feel like the costume is like, if I'm not like at least 75% proud of the costume, I'll just shelve it and keep plugging away at it till I feel confident in it, either with techniques or I know with quarantine, we've all put a little quarantine weight on. So I know there's some costumes I'm like, I'm going to go back to working out before I feel confident in that costume. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, there's so many conventions, well, not now, but there will be so many conventions every weekend that or photo shoots. Yeah, back when I started, I actually started a convention in Canada because I was so hard up for conventions.
Do you think that having a mentor, someone that you admire who helps you, is that really a practical expectation, or is there a degree of catty competition in there?
You mean like at what point? Like when someone's just starting out?
No, I mean, when someone is starting out, I mean, you've got all these social media groups where people get to ask questions and do things. But, sometimes I wonder, if you get, I'm a movie maker, so I tend to relate things back to that. You get some people who have a little bit of stardom and become unapproachable and demanding, and others that see their experience as being an opportunity to mentor somebody else. Do you find that mentoring is something that people are prepared to do, or is it, is there still that attitude, go away, I learned the hard way, go away and figure it out for yourself?
I think it depends on the person. Some people are just innately great at keeping track of their process and then sharing the process in a way that's understandable to people. I am not one of those people. I love sharing information. I have benefited by people being upfront about their information, and I think it's kind of a dick move when people, and there was a time in cosplay, I think it was like the mid to late 2000s, where people were really hoarding like techniques. I remember one guy in particular, he had made an Iron Man, moved, and everybody but in the same sense, and to be very candid, there are some people, and other cosplayers have talked to me about this, where someone will reach out to them and they'll be like, where do I get feathers? Okay, well, you can Google, where do I get feathers? Well, specifically what shop? Well, this is a shop I've used. And they're like, well, that shop doesn't have the right feathers. Can you find me the shop that has the right feathers? So it's kind of like, sometimes there's so much information out there that there isn't a lot of, some people, it's a struggle to sort of think like, hey, I should just Google this, because I've spent hours just finding the right term for the thing I'm looking for. So it's definitely a balance. It's like having a mentor and following people's footsteps, but also like adapting on what people are doing. I think that's why cosplay is really, the quality has gone up. It's just the innovative thinking is what really sets cosplay apart.
Much easier for people now with the internet. I mean, when I was young, you had a question and you had to write down the question and try to remember it long enough to find some place where you could get an answer. I mean, now almost anything you can put in. But the reverse side of that is you have to watch out for the most common answer. People often mistake a popular answer for being the best answer, when just because it's a popular opinion, that just makes it common. You actually want to try and stretch yourself. And I'm not talking about cosplay here, I'm talking about life in general. Whatever it is you're looking for, if you want to be the one that stands out in a crowd, you can't do that by doing the same thing that everybody else in the crowd is doing.
That's,
I mean, it's
100%. I mean, in the cosplay world, you'll see a lot of I guess doppelgangers are sort of what you want to call them, and I use comic book art because I'm a friend with a lot of comic book art as an example. Like you said, it's great when you start off to kind of imitate somebody, but then you do have to develop your own style, because you are never going to be a better somebody else. You are always going to be the best you, and no one's going to be better than you at being you. So just be you. I think the reason I have a lot of longevity with cosplay is ultimately I pick the characters I want to cosplay because I want to cosplay them for one reason or another. I've seen a lot of people get really burnt out because they're just trying to keep up with the hottest trends. They're like, Overwatch is popular, I need to cosplay Overwatch. Animal Crossing is popular, I need to cosplay Animal Crossing. Now, if you love those things, there's totally nothing wrong with that. But if you're always going to be chasing, and it can get really tiring and really burnt out. But that's sometimes what happens when your hobby becomes your profession. You're going to have to push through. For me, I've always wanted to keep my cosplay, I treat it like a job. I spend as much time on it as a job. I take the craft seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. And that's why I chose to start working in film, is because, well, I could do cosplay full-time as a full-time career. I didn't want to lose that freedom to take my time to focus on something, to, not have to pump out costumes.
We'll talk later on about, there's definitely a big difference between working in movies and doing cosplay, because in your cosplay, you're creating what you want to create. And when you start movies, you've got to create what someone else wants you to create.
it's a different thing altogether. And I think it's kind of nice to be able to look at some of the characters created that have come from that.
The funny thing about cosplay is sometimes it's not the costume that costs money, it's the accessories that cost money. So in this case, I really, I did a ton of research, and there's different, a lot of times when people do Zatanna, they wear a coachman's hat, or there's different types of hats from that period. So I specifically wanted a top hat and a collapsible top hat. At the time, there were only 2 people in the world that made proper collapsible top hats. So while the costume wasn't much in materials, the top hat alone cost me $350.
Yeah.
Because the character has a top hat, and it was about doing the research to find out what the proper hat was.
Mm-hmm. But I have to tell you that there's not many people that are looking at the hat.
That's true, and that's all on the photographer. Also, a really fun trick is I have for anybody in channel, I have very small hands, and I do not like making gloves. So I'm always on eBay buying vintage gloves, because they tend to skew a little bit smaller. They have a sense of realism to them. You just have to make sure that you don't get them dirty. I've gone through 2 types of white lambskin gloves. Also, now with being an advocate, I mean, I've always been an advocate of animals, but I'm really trying to lessen my use of animal skins. So that's why I try to buy vintage or used if I do want to use leathers, because then I'm repurposing it as opposed to buying new hides.
This is
So yeah, so it's Zatanna from DC Comics, and some of the struggles with this was so she wears fishnets, and originally I went with a wider weave of fishnet, because if with these thinner weaves it reads kind of gray. But you know, this is the stuff in my mind when I look at the photos. This is the stuff I'm looking at. I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, that's why I chose that. I am very short, so I always have to wear things really high cut. That's why I pulled the underwear up underneath the corset.
The high cut is part of what's adding the glamour to the character.
Yeah, but I did
like longer and more appealing.
Right, but there is a sense. I also like to add a sense of realism to my stuff. So I do have a pair of like tuxedo shorts that I started when I first wore this costume that I wore, and it just like, well, I feel that's what she would have worn during that period. Sometimes it is a balance between I want to feel sexy and I want to be sexy, but I also love trying to have a sense of realism and what that character would actually be wearing in the real world.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think that that interpreting a character rather than just copying a character is a major part of what makes cosplay an art form? It's not just about. It's like someone says, "I'm a painter, and I can do a copy of a Rembrandt, or I can do a copy of a Gauguin." But really, it's when you take the work of someone else and interpret it into something that's uniquely your own, that you become an artist yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of, I think in late 2000s, what did set me apart, because during that time, it was really frowned upon to do your own interpretation of a character. What you saw on the screen is what you should be doing online. If the character is in spandex and color block, no extra seam lines, none of that. You had to do what you saw. Same with anime. There was no gender. There was really not really gender bend. And if there was, it wasn't as well received as it is now. But I was just a big advocate of like it is your voice and your love of the character that you're displaying. You know, don't be a derivative of somebody else. If an aspect of the costume doesn't make you feel comfortable, then change it. Because ultimately, the only thing, as long as you maintain the silhouette, like I always use the example of Batman. Batman has changed through the decades, but the thing that stays the same about Batman is his silhouette. And within that silhouette, you can kind of basically change whatever you want to be comfortable. Like I said, I have to scale things way down for me to make it look proportional on my body. So if, for instance, like if the person has a stomach showing and you don't want to show your stomach, or you don't want to show your arms, like, then just creatively think of a way that works with the character to do that.
Interpretation. One of the things I get people who come into the museum who are local people that are experimenting with art. And one of the things that I say to them, I know this doesn't sound like it's related, but it is directly. One of the things I say to them is, you know, when you're taking your subject matter, you have to decide what is your painting all about. It's not about just looking out the window and painting what you see, because if you're going to do that, you might just as well take a photograph.
Right.
You know, you paint a painting, you should be able to see the subject that you are trying to tell, but you should also see your opinion, why it is you painted it, what it is that you have to say about it. And that to me is when I look at costumes where someone has taken a basic character, but they've interpreted it into something that is there. Someone else frowns on it because they say, oh, I don't like mashups. But, you know, those are the ones that really speak to me, you know, much more.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, what I say is if you're proud of what you've created or what you put together, I mean, people can tear you apart, but it's much harder to do that and take it away from you when you have confidence in that. And that's something I learned. Like, I know there's been a big push for, and I don't talk about it often, the negativity in the community. And the community is actually much more supportive of unique ideas. And back in the mid 2000s, again, I keep going back there. If you didn't make your own stuff, you weren't a cosplayer. And now it's like embracing and accepting of everybody. If you go on a Chinese website and you want to be Star-Lord and you're a dad of 3 kids and you just don't have time to make stuff, go be Star-Lord, you know. But there are people who do want to focus on the craft as well. And that's, like I said, that's something that's just like ingrained in me.
That should be what the competitions are about, obviously, you know, in terms of looking at the work that someone has put into making something. So, you know, tell me about this character. This is something I'm not recognizing, or is it of some sort?
No. This is from a very popular video game called Final Fantasy VII. I played it when I was a kid. I loved it. I love all RPGs, and I can't remember what triggered me to want to do this character. I think it was just it was just like I was like, I just want to do something Final Fantasy. Like I love Final Fantasy, and I was like, this would be a fun character to do. So and a lot of times I'm like, oh, I'll do a slightly simpler character, and then I'll go do a hard character that I want, and then but I did try to add as much detail as I could, and you know, tailor things, even if it's bought pieces. You know, like the top is bought and the skirt is bought, modified. I try to do as much as I can. She's very popular. She's a very popular character. I love the character. She's my favorite girl in that series.
This goes completely the other way, you know. No, right. Absolute classics, right? And you pull this off so well. I mean, it's just like, oh, and you're a performer at Disneyland as well, you know. It's a
well, it's so funny too, because you were just talking about like, I look at this and I see the Snow Whites people are doing now that are like historically accurate, and I look at the Snow White, I'm like, oh, it's so plain. Like I would do it totally different. But there is something special about like going to a convention and a little girl thinking you're Snow White. So I mean, this is also one of my favorites. I can wear comfortable underwear. The shoes are flat, and it's and little girls think I'm a Disney princess. So it's kind of all things.
I love this photograph. I think this is just so you know, this is fun, and then you kind of mash it all up later on and you know, produce which has all those elements and yet takes it to an entirely new space. I mean, how do you what's in the mindset that takes you to say, oh, I've got this, I have this, and how am I going, you know, what am I going to do that's going to make it? Is it the idea that comes first, or is it the fact that you've got one costume and you can just adapt it into something else?
I mean, that always helps, like if you have a wig, but I saw a little sprite. Someone had made like a little basic sprite of a character like this, and I was like, oh man, that'd be really fun to make into like a full fleshed out idea. So and it always starts with, well, in the middle of my harder project, this will be a fun, easy project. And then it turned into like making the hoodie. And, you know, actually wasn't too bad. I made the hoodie, you know, finding the right boxing gloves. Again, it's very small hands. And I try to avoid super large logos. But, you know, and the devil's like in the detail. Like I have an apple core necklace on that you can't see. That's just the apple core. And then my fists say grumpy and bashful, you know, and then I have a princess Band-Aid on my cheek. So sometimes it is like, you're like, oh, I can quickly make another costume and repurpose some pieces. But I find now, I'm not great at repurposing stuff. Like even wigs, I'm just like, if it's with a costume, keep it with a costume. I'm just more likely to lose it if I repurpose it. So also,
yeah, still very creative in you know, in its own
which is strange because I really struggle with original characters. Like the Tinkerbell, I was like, okay, when do I dial it back? Like, when have I gone too far? When have I like flown too close to the sun? So I find doing original characters are actually kind of a struggle for me.
Well, I think we're going to come down to question time here. So let us see what we've got, because when we started, there was nothing here, and now we've got
Thank you guys.
Looks like we've got a collection of questions here.
Oh my God, I'm gonna ramble
through these. Okay, so you've mentioned lots of times people will show up in an obscure anime character you know nothing about. What's your process in figuring out how to capture the essence of an unknown character?
Oh, that is a good question. I mean, it wouldn't be obscure to me, but I basically, even if the character is obscure, I'll still cosplay it anyways, because I love the character for one reason or another. And it's funny because a lot of times that will encourage people to like check out the series or check out the movie or check out the manga, because they're like, oh, that's really cool.
What is your favorite character to play, costume character?
Oh, I always cop out. I have so many that are my favorite, and there's so many that I still want to do. Like, you know, I still want to do Nazca. I still want to do a Legend of Zelda costume. My dream costume would be Pris from Bubblegum Crisis. It's a full hard suit. I think that's something I've always wanted to do. Because I like the series. Well, it's not my favorite, but I always was like, the challenge of making that costume, I think, would be a lot of fun.
And someone else wants to know how you deal with criticism of your costumes or your modeling or of whatever else. I mean, that's always going to be a classic question.
I mean, everybody handles it differently, and I am by no means the best. Much like a lot of people, I will have many wonderful and thoughtful comments, and I will just focus on that one negative comment, and it will just eat away at me. But I have to say, with the advent of like, you know, you just take pride in what you've put out there, and it's a lot harder for people to come at you. And sometimes you get snarky. Sometimes you're like, okay, well, go make it yourself, and then come back to me and show me what yours looks like, and then we'll talk about it. But a lot of times, the people criticizing you.
Criticism can be very hard to deal with one way or another. I think part of it depends upon where that criticism is coming from. You know, when I have someone who I know to be a friend who says to me something about what I'm doing that they think could be done better, I know that the intention is to make the product, make the final thing better, and I try to always incorporate that, to take a moment to look at things the way they are seeing them. There are sometimes those people who are just critical and don't understand all the difficulties you had to go through to get to that point, and they're just being snitty for the sake of being snitty. And those, I think, we're all, if we make things, we are by our very nature sensitive. We're sensitive sensitive enough to perceive it. You're sensitive enough to be hurt by things that people say, and they do.
Yeah, because you've put yourself into your cosplay, and then also you're putting yourself out there, having your picture taken, and you're basically vulnerable. And people just criticize, just tear people down to tear people down. And it is building up a shell. It is understanding that, like, there's no basis where their criticism is coming from. They don't know what you went through. They don't understand what it takes to make a costume. And
ultimately, if you don't want to be criticized, don't do anything. I mean, whatever it is that you do, someone is going to criticize it. I've got about another 3 questions or so I'm going to try and just squeeze them in here.
Okay.
Where's a good place to start with cosplay? This is someone who says, my son loves it and I have some basic skills, but feel lost to know where to start.
Basically, there are a ton of great Joanne's. There are great patterns online. There are a ton of tutorials. The hardest thing will be for him to pick an outfit and to go from there. But basically just like Google everything, and most likely someone out there has probably made something or variation of something. Also, I mean, a great way to see if he's into it is I do a lot of thrift store shopping. For instance, months and months ago, I went to the thrift store and I was able to pick out a Marty McFly outfit that was relatively close. So if he just wants to cosplay, you know, make a list of characters and see if you can buy some stuff at the thrift store. And I've also learned a lot by my own clothing. Or in his case, his clothing, you can take it apart. If he has a shirt that he really looks good in and it'll work for the character, you can take it apart, cut it out in different fabric, and then use that as your pattern and put it together. I've learned a lot by looking at how actual clothing is put together, but there's tons of tutorials and patterns you can use. Yeah.
So here's a question about the corset. It says is that Satania?
Satana. Yeah.
All right. Corset is gorgeous. Did you make it yourself? And if so, did you tailor a pattern to your size, or did you drape it?
So when Zatanna was made, I was just starting to learn how to sew. So a lot of that particular costume was done by a tailor I learned under name Sean Patton. Since then, I have changed some of the boning. The boning was plastic, and I put metal boning in just because of over the years it's warped. But because of him teaching me and seeing the way he did it, I was able to do my Tinkerbell corset, and I've done all the corsets since then. Because I was very fortunate to learn under somebody who was a tailor. And a lot of times I think, and we'll probably address this in the next panel, it's better to learn how to create real clothing and then make cosplay than it is to, how do I describe it? If you're going to do art, it's better to draw from life before you draw comics rather than just learn how to draw from comics, because then you understand how clothing works.
Yeah, but I think also in terms of reaching out to people who can help you with elements that you can't do yourself is actually how you grow. I don't mean by that just get someone else to do it. What I mean is you bring them in to pick their brains. When I was making movies where I had lots of things to do, and there were elements that I imagined seeing them made but didn't necessarily have the skills to do it, I would bring in someone who was an expert in that area, and then I would watch what they were doing and try to learn as much as I could along the way. And so I ended up as being a like you were talking about, more of a jack of all trades, who was okay at lots of things, not necessarily the greatest expert at any individual item, but was able to bring together those multiple issues. And from what you're saying, I feel that you're walking a similar path.
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest thing I would say though is if you aren't just straight up commissioning somebody, which I know a lot of cosplayers do, if you are asking to learn from somebody, pay them for their time. They are training you, they are giving you a skill or trade. Maybe you have a friend who's really great at woodworking and you're really great at sewing. You guys can do a skill trade. But too often, I think people expect craftsmen to work for free and give them their years of experience for free. It's like a lot of times these are how people make their money. So just be considerate of their time. More than often, they're happy to train and teach, and I love helping people, but like I used to get caught up in costume breakdowns for people, and I would spend 4 hours breaking down someone's costume for them to email me and be like, well, I don't want to do it that way, break it down again. And I'm like, okay, well.
Yeah, well, I think there's another side of this as well, which is actually to offer yourself as an assistant to whatever they are doing. So you give them your time, but you're learning on the job, and you're gaining skills by watching what they're doing, and you're helping them at the same time. Last couple of questions here. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of cosplay uses the feminine form to attract viewers, and you rarely see overweight cosplayers at the forefront of the field. What do you think could be a good starting point to break that barrier to include cosplayers of all shapes and sizes?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, definitely the barrier's breaking. Just talking about it is the biggest thing. It's much like cosplaying, bullying, bring it up, talk about it, support the cosplayers that you want to see get more notoriety or be up in the forefront. But I definitely things are changing. I mean, I hate using the term overweight or plus size because it's such a sliding scale. Someone's plus size is someone's normal, and that's totally fine as long as someone is, for me, healthy. It's very taxing on your body, especially if you're doing big builds. So you want to be able to condition yourself to wear the cosplays. That's the only time I'm like, hey, you might, I know my arm gets sore lifting like a 10-pound weapon. So, I'm going to work out a little bit just so I can like carry this weapon around. But I think just talking about it and supporting those cosplayers is really important. Same with cosplayers of color. I am really seeing the community change and support all types of cosplayers and call people out when they're being dicks. Like I'm not into sugarcoating cosplay. I'm about calling it like it is, and just don't be a dick and just support people. And if people are being dicks, call them out on it.
I think that cosplayers, like everybody else, have to understand that there are different markets that are attracted to different things, and those girls that are playing along the lines of making the most of being slim and glamorous and what most people think of as glamorous are making their living whatever way works for them and getting their stardom, so to speak, in that regard. You just join a different group. If you don't have that particular asset, well, make the most of some other asset.
I mean, I don't.
Caribbean, where all the guys think that the fat girl is the one that's really attractive. They don't like skinny girls, right?
I mean, booties are in, and I've got no booty. So I mean, I am like, hail to the booty girls. Like, but I'm just like, I'm gonna play to my strengths. It is not the booty.
How would you suggest to start building a following? What do you do to remind yourself to stay active in the cosplay community? I'm a cosplay creator, but without conventions. I find it hard to share my work and to really grab people's attention.
You shouldn't be cosplaying solely to have a following. You should be cosplaying because you love it, either the characters or you have a passion for creating. But with that in mind, it is a wonderful experience to share that with people online. And I love everybody who follows me, and I love following other people who are passionate. And I think ultimately, some of the standard things, post often, decide what kind of cosplayer you want to be. Do you want to be a craftsman, a creator, a maker? Then I'm really bad for it. And I don't think people realize I make a lot of my stuff because I do not post progress photos. I am terrible for it. But if you want to be understood as that type of maker, post progress photos, because that will draw other makers to you. If you want to go the more modelly, sexy route, then be taking those types of photos and just be on with your brand. I think that's why I kind of blend between both. I'm not really hyper focused on either. And I don't mind that, I guess. But yeah, just stay true to what type of cosplayer you want to be, and just post often, interact with people. Be genuine. Do not be fake. I have been disappointed by meeting other cosplayers who are not the person they portray online as they are in person. It can be a little bit of a bummer.
And I hate to cut these last
Great
three
questions.
Because they are good questions. And how did you make that transition of going from being a cosplayer to being that professional person?
So my transition was I was working as a fine art mold maker. And one of our clients was a makeup special effects guy, and he was doing fine art, but in between doing fine art, he would still take makeup effects jobs. And he said, hey, I know you do cosplay. We're essentially looking for a prosthetics PA, but someone who can also do specialty costuming. Would you be interested? And so I said, oh, yeah, sure. So they sent me to what I call fat camp school in LA for a few days. And I learned how, it was a spectral motion. They did the first Hellboy, and why am I forgetting some other stuff they did? It was like a blur, and I came back, and so the first movie I ever did was Big Mama's House 3. I wrangled the fat suits, cleaned the fat suits, repaired the fat suits. I had no clue about set etiquette. I had never worked with fat suits before. And then being a prosthetics PA on top of that, it was the most amazing time of my life. Wouldn't change it for the world. And then from there, people who worked at Spectrum Motion, I went on X-Men First Class, and that was worked with a few people from that. ADI worked on that, and so I wrangled the Beast suit on set costumer, and then word of mouth. That's it.
Our foundation is basically about, you know, uplifting people, inspiring people to believe in themselves and to be creative in whatever form. And so the transition from hobby to profession is something that's very, you know, very close to my heart. It's at the heart of a lot of the things that I do. When people come and see me in a museum and I'm talking to them, I had a couple of people who came and talked to me and ended up, you know, on the crew on Rogue One. You know, in my day when I was heads of department, you know, I had people who started with me as trainees that are now part of the Academy, deciding who gets the Oscars, who are producers with Steven Spielberg, or one of the guys who was 16 when he started with me made Blade, the director of Blade. So you know, this particular panel is very, you know, close to my heart. But you know, it's famine or feast when you're making movies. You're struggling to try and make a living, and then you're the it guy, and everybody wants you, and you can't ever get a day off. You can't get a break. You can't get a holiday. Riki, did you find that you know, that going into the business, you had so much else that was going on with your cosplay that you didn't really notice so much the you know, the gap where you weren't making movies, or was it something that you did through you know, outside jobs, through you know, outside firms, or were you know, going in as a studio worker? How did that happen?
I'm part of our local 479 union. For me, the one thing I did notice, I'd always made a decision that conventions will never affect movie work, because movie work is my priority, even though I'm at the bottom. I mean, I consider myself at the bottom. So it is weird. I'm sorry, this sounds like a weird, like, backhanded. It's weird to go from a convention where they pick you up in a car, you have a green room, you have a hotel, to like going to set and just being like cleaning sweat out of like somebody's outfit, you know. So I for the longest time I did keep it under wraps. I mean, people always find that strange when they find out it's like I'm some kind of weird freak show on set, that I have this secret life.
It's a matter of the journey of life that you're making, that you say, well, yeah, this is working out for me. Maybe this won't be there forever. Maybe I won't be, you know, maybe I'm a star here today and I'm not going to be, maybe my enthusiasm for that will wane. You have to grow as a human being, and that takes you through different hills and valleys.
Yeah, but to quickly answer your question, anytime I wasn't working on a film, I was using downtime to make costumes, or you know, just work on my skills, hone my skills. You never know what the next job's going to ask you to do, you know. Yeah. And so you might not be a master at whatever they're asking you to do, but to have a little bit of base knowledge that you can then develop on it goes a long way. So I almost use cosplay as sort of a way to test my skills. As I said, I'm not like a natural seamstress. I'm not a natural sculptor.
Riki, thank you, and I'll see you again sometime, I hope. Okay.
Thanks for.
Yeah, so guys, you know, I think Riki did a great job there of giving us a real overview of how one can go from being nothing in a little town to being, you know, effectively a celebrity in your chosen field. And she's very down to earth and very accommodating in her answers too. You know, creativity is is what we focus on at the Follow Your Star Foundation, trying to encourage youngsters to follow their dreams and oldsters to get off their butts and pursue that interest that they didn't have time for before, before they run out of time or energy to do it. I want to thank you for watching the panel. You can re-watch at any time over the next couple of weeks. So if there's something you feel that you missed that you want to make more of, just come back, watch it again. And if you have friends who are interested, share the recording link and bring them into the Follow Your Star Foundation fold, Please also, if you like our videos, we do this every Sunday. So, consider becoming a Follow Your Star Foundation supporter on Patreon. I'll put that link up again right here. Just for a few dollars a month, it helps us, keep things going while we're through this. We're a non-profit trying to encourage people to follow their dreams, but we still got to pay the bills. And we're in the Caribbean, where all income here is tourist-based, and the money flow has come to a complete halt. You can be a Patreon supporter by donating as little as $5 a month. And that entitles you to all our live shows as well as the recording ones. All income goes to keeping the Yoda Guy Movie Museum and the foundation going while we're treading water through this horrible economic time. This is Nick Maley, Yoda Guy. Saying, have a great week, and I'll see you in another week. And may the Force expand your horizons and be with you always.